Hello everyone, welcome to our channel about retiring earlier or better at home or abroad, whatever suits you best. Today we're talking about the expat news flash that we think you might really want to know about. And yeah, go ahead.
Okay, this is really good news.
Oh?
Yes. A 97-year-old with high blood pressure survives COVID-19 in Wuhan, China.
Wow.
Also in the same ward was her 79-year-old daughter and her 46-year-old granddaughter, and they all recovered from COVID-19 and they all went home together.
That's
happy
amazing,
and healthy.
considering that the at-risk group is all of the above, all of the generations of her family.
Exactly.
You know, plus or
That's
minus
why
a few
this
years.
made news. This is good news.
That is good news. It's pretty amazing that people, you know,
I think so.
all within that risk group would be actually all surviving and all in the same family. Good for her, you know.
Wow. 97 years old. Can
and
you
surviving
imagine?
COVID-19.
Oh yeah, I forgot to say. She had an underlying health condition. It was
Seriously?
Yes, she had the 97-year-old woman has high blood pressure.
Huh. Wow, that's pretty amazing. That's pretty amazing news.
But
That's
it's
good
really
news.
happy.
Amazing news. Interesting news. The whole family like that, all in the risk group. Great, great.
I'm going to
Super.
put the video in the description so you guys can watch it. It's really uplifting.
Yeah.
And next, this is really cool. This one you guys are going to find amazing. An Indian expat student that is living in Dubai created a robot that goes around sanitizing people's hands.
So like if you're sitting there at your desk, the robot comes by and...
Well, no, you have to be in the certain spot it's in. I don't know if maybe they put it in the malls or whatever, but there was a reason why he came up with this idea. When you pick up the sanitizer bottle to do your hands, then you're just touching it. Everybody's touching it with their dirty hands.
The sanitizer bottle itself is dirty, too dirty to use, so this robot comes around and does it for you.
Yeah, it says that all you have to do is be like 30 centimeters away and it'll realize that your hands need cleaned, and it sanitizes your hands. It's a robot.
So it's like
It's
a personal butler that comes around and says, "Hey, here's your wipes."
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, isn't that cool?
Yeah. Does he come to your house?
Well, I don't know. Should we call him? Let's call him. And the next news flash is Hong Kong is trying to, well, they actually are going back to normalcy after being in lockdown for a month. Now, granted, like 7.5 million people or something, there was only 150 confirmed cases. And what's happening now is there's just no cases at all for several days and stuff, and so everybody's getting all excited, and they're starting to, all the transportation is back to normal, and they're going back to work in shifts. Some of the restaurants are opening back up again. So this is how it's going to be probably in another month or two, I think.
So it started out in Asia, and Asia is starting to rebound because even reports of China are starting.
In Wuhan, yes.
They're starting to come out saying that the cases are dwindling.
Well, they're letting go many of the hospital workers that were there, you know, because they needed to have extra workers there at the time because of so many patients coming in at one time. So they had a whole bunch of volunteers.
It's nice to hear that there's a light at the end of the tunnel. Yeah, all great news. Survivors and dwindling cases and things going back to normal. All good things that we want to hear about today. And speaking of which, I ran into some fun facts about France because I noticed that the country that has the most amount of tourists, the most tourists in the world, which we were talking about Italy the last few weeks and how many tourists they were getting, is France. So France has more tourists than any other country in the world, 87 million in 2017. I don't know what...
Wow, that's a lot.
I don't know what this latest scare has done to that, but because of that, I thought, well, you know, I ran into some fun facts about France since it was in the limelight thanks to the tourism. And listen to this. It's legal to marry a dead person in France.
Oh no.
As long as you can prove they intended to marry you before they died. So, you know, they were going to marry you, and if they died, well, you know, why cut off the wedding and all the partying and all that? We can just crack out the champagne anyway, and it would be legal to do so. Another thing is that in France, it is illegal to name a pig Napoleon, but, you know, you can name your dog Napoleon if you want. You don't have to name a pig Napoleon. You might wonder,
You're serious?
why in the world? Because Napoleon was one of the leaders in history. If you haven't studied your history, you know, around 1800s, the guy was one of those, you know, despots that was trying to.
I don't study my history?
No, not you, huh?
Oh, okay.
But you can call your pig Napoleon in any other country, you just can't do it in France, okay? But the thing is that Napoleon is also often referred to as one of the greatest enlightened despots. So he was a despot, but he was enlightened, and although he didn't follow the ideas of enlightenment entirely, he managed his country in a way that he maintained complete authority as well as many of the gains of the French Revolution. So I bring this up because it is in the fun facts, but also because that's where your code Napoleon comes from. Which, by the way, he wasn't, as it says in the article, he wasn't really the greatest enlightened because he didn't really invent the code Napoleon, although it was named after him because he used it during that time. He actually robbed it from other despots that came before him. Anyway, don't name your pig Napoleon, even though all of these things. So, and speaking of Europe,
is this a new news flash?
Yes, speaking of Europe, some Italian virologist says that concern over racism is what crippled Italy's coronavirus response. Now, this wasn't really concern over racism, rather it was concern over the appearance of appearing as racist. In other words, political correctness, which clearly doesn't work. An Italian virologist says that the country's attempt not to appear racist in the early days of the coronavirus outbreak crippled their ability to properly respond to the pandemic. So, there was a proposal to isolate people from the epicenter at first, coming from China, but then it became seen as racist. So they didn't want to appear as racist, and therefore, but they were people coming from that area that was the outbreak. Italy is now the hardest hit country, as we all know, in the world in terms of deaths, with over 3,400 people. So the need to minimize potential appearance of racism or just racism and stigmatization in response to the coronavirus was a policy endorsed by the World Health Organization. Very interesting. And adopted by the left-wing Italian government. So what do you know? As previously highlighted, the mayor of Florence launched a nationwide campaign at the start of February encouraging Italians to hug Chinese people on the street to stem the hatred.
I saw that video. They were doing that.
And along the same lines, not to be outdone, Sweden has announced new restrictions on many foreigners hoping to enter the country from outside of the European Union. amid the spread of coronavirus, but asylum seekers will be exempt from border controls. No, some people will never learn from history, even if they are number 7 on the happiest country graph of the happiest countries, and Swedes are actually leaving Sweden, which is what we were discussing in one of our other news flashes. So interesting, isn't it, how people don't learn from their neighbors, or just, you know, they say that a genius learns from his mistakes, but a wise man learns from the mistakes of others. So you figure out where they fit in on that scale. Anyhow, that's what's happening, and mostly good news.
Did you notice something about all these news flashes, Frank?
I was smiling.
They were all about the coronavirus. So this next news flash coming up is going to be different. Here it is.
Good news. A Dutch company named Cover apparently came out with some kind of clothing that makes the wearer completely untraceable by modern tracking devices. Like what? You know, you've heard of this, where you can, nowadays, hackers or even just big corps that want to spy on you in any institution, thanks to these little rice-sized microchips that they put in everything now, your ID card, your passports, and who knows what else, that can be read at a distance. So then when you're walking around, you could be hacked, you could be scanned. Apparently, the writer of this article was able to read all of his identification information with an app on his cell phone. He was able to read his identity card with an app on his cell phone. So anyhow, they came up with this clothing which is made of a metalliferous fabric, which means it includes some metal, some very thin strands of metal that renders computer chips and ID cards and credit cards unreadable, and basically takes your phone off the grid, as they say. You can get these wallets now. They make special wallets where you can put your things in that protect. I always thought, though, that a simple potato chip bag after you eat the chips, or you can dump them if you don't eat chips, you know, 15 to 30 cent deal could just put your phone in that if you don't mind the smell of potato chips. Or, you know, duct tape works. But in any case, whatever way you want to handle it, they came out with this clothing, anti-surveillance clothing, and just the idea of protecting yourself and keeping your personal information private. And what's really interesting about the article is that they feel that with this new line of clothing, they hope to help people take control of their privacy. Imagine that. People often say they have nothing to hide. You hear this a lot, that they are more than willing to trade their privacy for sharpened safety measures. But as the clothing manufacturer says, this is nonsense. Everyone has something to hide. People have multiple facets to their lives and personalities that is completely normal. Privacy actually shapes a person into who he is and who he wants to be. What a thought. And it's interesting that it's a Dutch company, and I wonder, I've seen also an additional company in Colombia that made bulletproof clothing. So we're seeing a lot of the kind of bulletproof clothing, pretty amazing stuff. Yeah, if you live in Detroit, that might make sense. Or any place where there's these riots going on, you just don't ever know. Interesting to me how the companies were not from the US. You see a lot of stuff, a lot of the new technology and the new things that come out nowadays are always from the US. So it's interesting to me that we're seeing a lot of this kind of new ideas come out from places other than US. Now all you've got to do is come up with other things that are not US centric and US based, like the old e-gold that got pounced on and destroyed. Had it been non-US based, that might not have happened. With that, you know what to do if you liked the video, and check out the links below. And thanks for coming to our channel. Have a nice day.
Ciao.